So, picture this. You're on trial for your life. The room is packed with the entire political and military elite of the region, and they've all gathered just to hear your case. And your only defense? It's an unbelievable story about a blinding light, a voice from heaven, and a life turned completely upside down. That's the exact situation we're diving into today.
Okay, so let's get right into it. The stakes here could not be higher. We have a prisoner, a man named Paul, and he's facing accusations from his own people that basically amount to treason. The local community is literally shouting that he ought not to live any longer. The penalty they are demanding is death.
So, how in the world does Paul defend himself? Well, not with legal loopholes or a long list of witnesses. No, he defends himself by telling a story. And it's a story so wild, so out there, that it forces everyone listening, and yeah, that includes us, to ask a pretty simple question. Is this guy a complete lunatic, or is he actually telling the truth?
To really appreciate the genius of his defense, you have to understand the room. I mean, this isn't some back alley tribunal. This is a full-blown, formal hearing in front of the highest authorities in the entire land. The source material says the king and his sister, Bernice, showed up with great pomp. Think about that. You've got King Agrippa, Governor Festus, and all the city's most powerful military and civic leaders. And then Paul, a prisoner in chains, is brought in to stand before all of them. The power imbalance is just staggering. Now, what's really fascinating here is why this trial is even happening. The Roman governor Festus has a serious problem. You see, Paul has appealed his case to the emperor in Rome, which means Festus has to send him. But, and this is a big but, he admits he has nothing definite to write to Caesar. He thinks it's totally unreasonable to send a prisoner without even specifying the charges. So this whole hearing is basically his last-ditch effort to figure out what crime exactly Paul is supposed to have committed.
So, with permission to speak, Paul begins his defense. And he starts in the most unexpected way you can imagine. Not with a denial, but with a confession about who he used to be. Right off the bat, he establishes his credentials. This is a brilliant move, strategically. He tells King Agrippa, who's an expert in all the local Jewish customs, that he was a Pharisee, part of the most zealous, most respected religious group around. He's basically saying, hey, I'm not some outsider. You all know my background. I was the ultimate insider. And he does not shy away from the man he was. He doesn't just say he disagreed with the followers of Jesus. No, he says he was obsessed with persecuting them. He threw people in prison. He cast his vote to have them executed. He even hunted them down in foreign cities. He's painting this vivid picture of a man who is violently, passionately opposed to the very message he now represents. And that makes his transformation all the more unbelievable. So the million-dollar question is, what could possibly turn a man like that into the prisoner standing before them today? Well, Paul's answer is a single, dramatic event that he claims changed absolutely everything. He sets the scene perfectly. He was on one of his persecution journeys, heading to the city of Damascus, and he was armed with the full authority of the chief priests to continue his violent campaign. It was around noon. And then it happened. A light from heaven, a light he says was brighter than the sun, just blazed around him and everyone with him. He says they all fell to the ground. See, this isn't some private little vision, it was a public event. And out of that blinding light, a voice speaks his name in his own native language, Aramaic, asking this piercing question. When Paul asks who's speaking, the answer he gets is the absolute core of his entire defense. The voice claims to be Jesus, the very person whose followers Paul was trying to wipe out. For everyone in that room, this is the make or break moment of his story. It's either a truth that redefines reality itself, or it's a complete blasphemous delusion. Now, Paul argues that this vision wasn't just some startling experience. It came with a whole new set of marching orders. His entire life was recommissioned on that road. And this is where his defense pivots from personal story to a legal argument of, well, compelled obedience. He lays out the mission he says he received right then and there. It was this 4-part command to go to both his own people and to the Gentiles, the non-Jews, and deliver this message of spiritual transformation. He's framing all of his actions after that point, not as his own choices, but as simple obedience to a divine command. This right here is the pivot of his whole legal argument. He looks the king right in the eye and declares that he simply did what he was told. He's effectively saying, look, my only crime is that I obeyed this command from heaven. What else was I supposed to do? It's a masterful way to reframe the whole debate. And this just maps out the direct consequences. You can draw a straight line from him following that vision, preaching first in Damascus, then all over Judea, and finally to the Gentiles, and it leads directly to him being grabbed in the temple courts and put on trial for his life. He is connecting his obedience to the very reason he's standing there in chains. So how does this room full of powerful, pragmatic rulers react to a defense that's based entirely on a supernatural vision? Well, the reaction is split, and it is explosive. Governor Festus, the practical Roman official, he's heard enough. He literally interrupts the trial, shouting at the top of his lungs that Paul is insane. And his diagnosis? Too much reading has completely broken Paul's mind. It's a rational man's attempt to just explain away something he finds totally unbelievable. But Paul doesn't even flinch. He just calmly addresses the governor with respect and says, "I am not insane." He insists his words are both true and reasonable. Then he turns right back to the king, pointing out that these things weren't done in a corner and that Agrippa must have heard about them. King Agrippa's reaction is completely different. He doesn't dismiss Paul as a madman. Instead, he seems intrigued, maybe even a little defensive. You see, his question isn't about sanity, it's about persuasion. He gets it. He recognizes that Paul hasn't just been defending himself, he's been trying to convert the entire courtroom. The strategy actually worked. And this is Paul's incredible closing statement. He basically agrees with the king. Yep, that's exactly what I'm doing. He says he prays that everyone in that room, from the king on down, would become just like him. And then he adds, with the poignant exception of his chains. He just turned his own trial into this heartfelt appeal for their transformation. After this, the king and the governor get up and leave to discuss the case in private. And their verdict? They all agree. Despite the incredibly bizarre story, Paul hasn't broken a single Roman law. He's done nothing worthy of death or even imprisonment. From a legal standpoint, he's innocent. But then comes the final, frustrating twist of irony. King Agrippa says to Festus that Paul could have been released right then and there. The only thing preventing it is a legal technicality. Because Paul had already appealed his case to the emperor, the local authorities no longer had the power to free him. And that's where the story leaves us, with an innocent man still in chains and this huge question just hanging in the air. Governor Festus heard a madman driven insane by too many books. King Agrippa heard a persuader with a powerful message, and Paul claimed to be a messenger with a divine commission. So the question his testimony really leaves for us is this: where's the line between madness and a message from God?